Okay. Srila Gurudev ki jai. Srimad Mahaprabhu ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Bhramara-gita ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Preman Hari Hari Bol. So good morning to all of you. Pranam, as I mentioned, from New Jersey this time, from one art studio where I'm staying, as you can realize maybe for my background. So we will be staying here for a week or so, then back to North Carolina. So we are continuing today with our series of lectures on Bhramara Gītā. Today is our 7th meeting, where we will be studying the second verse of the Bhramara Gītā per se. We have had 5 introductory lectures trying to create the momentum for the Song of the Bumblebee. And in our previous lecture, we officially began with the very first verse of this section. So today we will continue with the second verse, which is the verse 13 verse of chapter 47 of the 10th Canto of the Bhagavatam. But as usual, first of all, let's make some brief, or maybe not so brief, recap, summary of what we studied last week. First verse of the Bhramara Gītā, which is the 12th verse of this 47th chapter of the 10th Canto. So Bhramara Gītā, as we already mentioned, this was spoken by Sri Radha according to our Purvacharyas, Goswamis and so on. And this is particular because this Bhramara Gītā is spoken in the height of Divya Unmad, of the zenith or divine madness, divine ecstatic rapture, if you will, the very zenith, the very apex of what's called Adiruddha Modana Mahabhav, which in separation turns Modana Mahabhav turns into Mohana Mahabhav. So in separation, this is the highest limit possibly attained in love and separation, the figure of Sri Radha, who is Mahabhav Swarupini, who is the greatest emotions of divine love personified. So one aspect of this supreme state is called Chitra Jalpa, or mad delirious talks. There are 10 types of Chitra Jalpas, as Srila Rupa Goswami speaks in his usual Nilamani. So each one of the 10 verses of the Bhramara Gītā will correspond with each one of these 10 types of Chitra Jalpas, as we have seen in the first one. So Sri Radha will take the bee as Krishna's messenger, and she will start to have a dialogue with the bumblebee, and Uddhav, the official messenger, will be witnessing all that in total astonishment, overwhelming. So the very first verse we shared in our previous lecture there, Sri Radha was saying, of course the Bhagavatam is not mentioning her directly, so it says, Gopya Ubacha, Sri Gopya Uchu, one Gopi said, O honeybee, friend of the cheater, don't touch my feet with your whiskers, which are smeared with the kumkum that rubbed onto Krishna's garland when it was crushed by the breasts of a rival lover. Let Krishna satisfy the woman of Mathura, and one who sends a messenger like you will certainly be ridiculed in the Jadu's assembly. So this is the very first verse of the Bhramara Gītā, very unique, as you can see, type of Harikatha, type of praise in divine madness for divine Krishna, from divine Radha. So she starts by addressing of course, the bumblebee Madhupa, and addressing Krishna's Madhupati, and also addressing the bumblebee and Krishna, if you will, as Kaitava Bandhu. You are the friend of the cheater, you bumblebee. Therefore, Krishna is a cheater, and you are a friend of a cheater. So that's the entry point of her song here. So Sri Radha is calling Krishna a cheater for the reasons we already explained, and we will continue explaining. And then she proceeds in this verse and the next ones for sure to explain why he's a cheater, why she considers Krishna a cheater. Of course, mostly in the context of Krishna having promised, I will return when he left Braj. And that didn't happen. of course, on one level, on one platform of one Prakash. This didn't happen, and with certain purposes, as we know, and as we will continue seeing. And all this is increasing further and further Sri Radha's Mahabhav, and all the Vrajavasis' love for that matter, and Krishna's as well. So Radha will criticize the bumblebee, and will criticize Krishna through criticizing the bumblebee, and Uddhav will fall in between of all that criticism as well as the messenger that was sent by Krishna. So in this verse, Sri Radha is calling both the bumblebee and Krishna as drunks. You are Madhupa and your master is Madhupati. Madhupati could mean the master of Mathura, or Madhupuri also called sometimes, but also can be the king of liquor, the master of all intoxication. Both of you share not only similar names, but similar colors. You are black and you have some yellow stuff there. You share similar names, similar colors, you share similar natures. Both are drunkards, cheaters, one is supporting each other. So Sri Radha starts to abuse, to engage in bullying with the bumblebee in this context, divine bullying, Bhramara-gita. And especially she points to this fact: you bumblebee came with kumkum in your whiskers, and that kumkum is showing the state of your intoxication, because that kumkum is coming from the garland that was in contact with the heart or breast of a gopi, divine rival lover, when Krishna embraced her. So supposedly you're coming here as a messenger trying to pacify me. And this is the worst thing you could do to pacify me, to come with the testimony of our rivals, if you will. So you do not touch my feet. And if you touch them, do not do so with those whiskers. So ecstatically she's expressing all this. And this Krishna, your master, he likes to kill women. We are dying here in separation. And he acquired this woman killing samskar from his very birth, almost childhood, when he killed Putana being just a few days old. And from that, it's very clear that he accumulated further and further impressions in that direction. And now all the women of Braj are about on the verge of death, if you will. And now in Mathura, your master is going from one lady to another, trying to please them. But eventually his behavior will be known to the Yadu, to the men of the Yadu's dynasty, and he will be put to ridicule. So somehow she's saying all that to Krishna, criticizing him, but in the context of doing so, criticizing the bumblebee. In one of these 10 types, again, of Chitrajalpa, which in this case corresponds with one called Prajalpa, which is one of 10. Which in this particular case, Prajalpa combines disrespect, indignation, jealousy, and pride towards developed, of course, in the context of Prem, which is very different to how all the things play out in the conditioned life of the Bada Jiva. So again, for us as sadhaka, all the things are to be transcended. We are not to disrespect Krishna. We are not to show pride in front of Krishna, or nor anyone for that matter. But when we arrive to Braj, we find all these qualities reappear again, perfectly integrated in the context and dynamics of the Lila, and all of them expressed naturally and lovingly with Krishna in the center. So, of course, it's something very unique. A Prakrita, it seems ordinary, super extraordinary, and so high is what we are witnessing here. But it's so important. We spoke about that also at the end of our previous class, the importance of exposing ourselves to this discourse of those who have Prem, or what to speak of those who are made of Prem, the Ragatmikas. Because they are the ones who, and those who have Prem, and what to speak, who are made of Prem, are the ones who can speak to Krishna like Sri Radha or the Brajavasis do. Only those who love us the most are the ones who can criticize us in the strongest way, in the heaviest way, with the most intense words, but full of love, full of attachment, full of so many things, full of concern. So this is the case here. Even though it may seem like criticism, like negative stuff, it makes Radha's heart swell and overwhelm more and more with the waves of divine Prem. So Krishna is fully captured by such discourse, as you may imagine. All his mind is stolen from the Vedic hymns, and he's totally captured by the words like this, like Radha sharing here. And Uddhava, as we said, is short-circuiting at this point. And this is just the very beginning of the Bhramara Gītā, the second day. He hasn't yet achieved the first full day of his staying in Braj, So you can imagine how powerful experiences, impressions he's receiving here. So this was some recap from the previous lecture. So today we'll continue with the second verse from the Bhramara Gītā, verse number 13 of this 47th chapter of the 10th canto. So I will share the verse here in the chat via Zoom, and I ask you if you could please, any one of you, only one please, share that in the chat section of via Facebook streaming. So I will recite it. Of course, you can join me if you want. It says like this. Sakridadhara shuddham shamohinim payat gitva Shumanasaiva sadhyastatyajismam bhavadri Paricharati katham tatpadapatmanupatma Yapi bhatarita chitta yuttama shloka jalpai. So, Sri Radha says in this second shloka of Bhramara Gītā, after making us drink the enchanting nectar of his lips only once, Krishna suddenly abandoned us, just as you might quickly abandon some flowers. How is it then that goddess Padma or Lakshmi willingly serves his lotus feet? Alas, the answer must certainly be that her mind has been stolen away by his deceitful words. So this is the second stanza of Bhramara Gītā. Sri Radha continues her Chitra Jalpa. Again, speaking to Krishna, speaking to the bumblebee. Let's briefly analyze the word by word meaning of this word. First line saying, Sakrita dhara sudham shram mohinim payayitva. So Sakrit means once. Adhara sudham refers to the nectar, sudham of Adhara, of Krishna's lips, sometimes called Adharamrita. We spoke about this when discussing Beno Gita, Adhara Sudham, and Gopi Gita as well. Shram means his own, so his own nectar, the nectar of his own lips, only once, what? Mohinim payayitva. Mohinim is further qualifying that nectar. Mohini means bewildering, basically, and payayitva means making drink. So he made us drink the nectar of his lips only once. So, of course, we will explain why she's saying only once. We know it was not only once. So, what takes her to that subjective expression? The second line says, Sumana saiva sadhyastatyajismam bhavadrik. Sumanasa means flowers. So now comes some analogy, and here the bumblebee will be criticized again along with Krishna. Sumanasa iva, just like, so the analogy comes, sadhya, suddenly, tatyaji means abandoned, he abandoned in this case, ashman bhavadrik. Ashman means us, and bhavadrik, like you. In other words, after making us drink the nectar of his lips only once, Krishna abandoned us just as you, bumblebee, may quickly abandon some flowers after, the implication is after extracting its pollen, its nectar. So that's the second line. The third line, she says, Paricharati katam tat pada patmam nupadma. So now comes another character in the picture, which is Lakshmi Devi. So Sri Radha says, Paricharati, which means to serve, she serves. Katam, in this case, means why. So she starts to wonder why Lakshmi Devi acts like she does. Tat pada patman, his lotus feet. Nu means I wonder, and Padma. In this case, Padma means Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. So she says, I wonder how Lakshmi Devi remains serving his lotus feet willingly, after being who he is, after behaving as he behaved with us, similar than you, bumblebee. And in the fourth line, Sri Radha finds the answer to her own question. She presents the question, she presents the answer. Yapi bhata rita chitta hi uttama shloka jalpai. So he means he api in this case. Indeed, he api, because bhata means like alas or oh. She's surprised by the answer she found. Hrita, which means taken away. Chitta, her mind. So her mind has been taken away, indeed, alas. He, again, certainly, this is a fact, scientifically proved, on how her mind was taken away, and that's the reason for her to remain engaged in his service. Uttama shloka jalpai. By the jalpa, in this case, again, the word jalpa, which means like false speech, of Uttama Shloka. Uttama Shloka is the name of Krishna, as you know, that means he is praised with the highest poetry, the highest verses. Uttam means topmost, and Shloka means shloka, verses, poetry. So he who is praised with the most selected poetry. So the implication is he was like bewildered by Krishna's crafty words, if you will, and she remains serving him somehow. Or we could say she heard from others about the glories of Krishna, and she became bewildered by that, and that's why she remained there without realizing who he is, and so on. So some idea regarding the word by word. Let me share with you, to begin with, some of the implications of this verse. We'll try to unpack as much as we can. First of all, connected to what Srila Jiva Goswami shares in his Gopal Champu, as well as Sridhar Swami, famous ancient Bhagavad commentator, in his own purport to this verse. So they connect this verse with the previous verse, in between verses and ideas that the Bumblebee will present, a little bit in the way of how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur creates this in-between conversations, but not so much as him, as we'll see. So the Bumblebee will say, according to them, they will say to Radha, why are you speculating that my innocent master and I have faults? Why you have criticized us in the previous verse, saying you are drunks, you are cheaters, and so on, insulting us from tip to toe. The Bumblebee will say to Radha, I see no possibility that this is happening actually. So Sri Radha actually replies with this second verse. Say, okay, you say you don't have any fault whatsoever. Please hear the faults. This king of cheaters, this friend of yours, he came to us with some apparent attraction for us. We thought he will not leave us. We thought it was a different nature of situation, as the gopis say before to Uddhav. In this world, conditional love is one thing, and whenever you relate with someone with some selfish interest, whenever you get that, relation is over. You relate with a nice girl, but whenever the girl is not so nice, not so young, you look for some younger one. That's the nature of conditional love and affection. But the gopis say, we approach Krishna with unconditional love, without any selfish motive. But even though that happened, he left us. So why should that happen? If it's conditional love, okay, it ends in this frustration. But if it's unconditional, our approach was such, why Krishna left us? Of course, we know Uddhav short circuit, didn't know what to say. So here Sri Radha continues more strongly, making the same case. He came with apparent attraction. We thought he will not leave us. We gave ourselves fully. We renounced to all the things that nobody else could renounce. The topmost Tyagis and Sannyasis couldn't have the level of detachment that the gopis showed in connection to Krishna. And of course, what to speak, the level of attachment for Krishna. But suddenly he gave us up. Suddenly, from one moment to another, he departed and never returned. So what can be more condemned than this? And again, we are on the verge of death. He's about to engage in matricide. So in these verses, we see Sri Radha continues to compare Krishna to a bumblebee. So many times this is happening, the same name, the same nature, same color, as we mentioned. Madhusudan, the ones who ruins all the nectar. Sudayati, from the madhu, from the bee who takes away all the honey from their lotus face and then goes to some other flowers. So Sri Radha here showing how Krishna is a cheater in her loving anger. Remember, this loving anger is an expression of prem. She's explaining the cause of Krishna's cheating, and thus that strengthens her anger and therefore her love. So she said here, he made us drink the nectar of his lips only once, and then he gave us up, like you will do with a flower. So again, Sri Radha is mainly criticizing Krishna, but in the context of doing that, she's criticizing all that is connected to Krishna. Because of her obsessive nature, that everything is connected to Krishna, basically. They say that when she is in man or she's angry with Krishna in some daily moment, she doesn't want anything that may be resembling Krishna. But that's a way of getting more absorbed in Krishna indirectly. So she covers everything that is black. Whatever is black, she takes that off from her own body. He puts all white clothes, white sandalwood paste. She covers all the spots in the house that may resemble Krishna's color. But in that absorption, she gets even more and more engrossed in remembrance of Hari. So that's how the Lila works, how this union separation dynamics play themselves out, these twin polarities of love, these two sides of the golden coin of Prem. So she's making the point. She make us drink that nectar, but she left us. So in her distress, she's saying the reason why the goddess, such a person like Lakshmi, is engaged constantly, we know, in his service, is because she was fooled by Krishna's sweet words, intoxicating promises, cheating nature, basically. And the gopis went through that experience, but now we are learning through deep suffering who he is. It seems that Lakshmi is not yet aware of that. So in that sense, in that context, we could say Radha is even criticizing Lakshmi, which of course, no problem, is her own partial expansion. She has the right to do so. So Sharad implies here also, okay, remember, Krishna is Madhupati, the Lord of liquor. So he made us drink that liquor, that nectar, intoxicating beverage of his other amrita, the sweet honey of his lips once, and then by force or by some other pretense, whatever, he gave us and started enjoying with other ladies. And those lips are so bewildering that our intelligence collapsed. And that made us develop intense greed for him. And again, all the things may resemble to our human experience of greed, of desire, but it's a world apart. Bear in mind this and make this context be fixed in our heart every time we are hearing all this narrative. This is sacred, passionate love. Ragatmika bhakti, not even raganuga bhakti, but ragatmika bhakti. The love of those who are made of love. So Sri Radha is saying to the bumblebee, like you take you leave any flower without any like problem. After extracting all the honey you wanted, he took all the honey from us and went to some other flowers. And a bumblebee also when he's approaching one flower, starts to sing, starts to buzz to the flower. It seems like he's singing to the flower. He's so nice, the flower will think, oh, this bumblebee is singing to me something, some lullaby, whatever. But not. Actually, the bumblebee is only there to suck the honey. That's his real purpose. And when there's no more honey to extract, the bee will leave without singing, without anything. So the honey in the flower is the cause of priti, of the affectionate so-called approach of the bumblebee there. So similarly, Sri Radha implies with this analogy, Krishna approached us singing and playing flute and pronouncing so many nice things that only his intention was bumblebee-like, extracting our honey, extracting the pollen of our lotus phases. And whenever he reached his purpose, he left us and went to some other inferior flowers, inferior ladies. So by describing his lips as enchanting, here Sri Radha used the word Mohinim. Remember, Mohinim that's the name of Sri Radha indeed also. She who enchants, the all enchanter. Madan Mohan is enchanted by Madan Mohan, Mohini. And by this, she cannot but reveal her continual increasing greed for him, for those lips, for that Adaramrita. And the interesting point is that we know that Sri Radha kissed those lips repeatedly, not only once. Krishna had Rasa Lila with the gopis and Sri Radha and so on. On a daily basis, they started to meet, as you know, after the killing of Aristasura, also in the middays at Radhakund. So the point is, Sri Radha says here, but I only drank that nectar once. So why is she saying only once? Of course, we know, due to the extreme longing, extreme thirst, extreme anurag, basically. That's a symptom of divine love. You tasted that so many times, but that's so deep, so sweet, and you want to serve that again. This is not enjoying spirit in a selfish way. You want to really serve that and give yourself to that experience as much as you can. But that is so deep and so sweet that you feel no matter what I do, it's never enough. It's like I've never done that. That's a symptom of prem called anurag. Krishna Radha meet so many times, but they feel this is the first time we are meeting. This is the first, and they are separated after that meeting. Oh, when will I meet that beautiful girl that I lives in Barsana? And they speak about the other person as if they do not know them. They just saw them, they heard about them, but they have just been together 15 minutes back. That's the astonishing Adbhut Charit, astonishing features of one of them, friend, that cause Radha to forget all those previous experiences out of extreme attachment. Love is blind. Divine love is a type of blindness. And of course, Rai doesn't like it. Srila Jiva Goswami also paraphrases Sri Radha in this verse in his commentary, Lagu Vaishnava Toshani. Sri Radha says here that the Lord of drunkards, this Madhupati, is giving sorrow to those who have pure mind, Sumanasa. Here the word Sumanasa can mean flowers, regarding the analogy with the bumblebee, but also can mean those with pure minds, referring to the gopis. So Krishna is giving sorrow to us gopis with pure minds because of his bad character, and he's taking happiness for himself. So therefore, Sri Radha is kind of advising the bumblebee, do not remain friends with that cheater. I know you are friends of him, you are Kaitava Bandhu, but stop that friendship right now. And the word Babadrik, Srila Jiva Goswami, which means like you, when she compares Krishna to the bumblebee, can be also applied to the bee, like implying he's like you, or it can be also applied to Krishna as the drunkard. You are like him, like implying you are like him, he's like you. You come from afar to take sweet fragrances. You wander about everywhere, and you perform actions like kissing while making sweet sounds, as we mentioned, the bumblebee does, and Krishna does himself also. Sri Radha also implies here, as Sri Jiva points out in his Gopal Champu, that I think that Krishna has no fear of giving pain to others, because he has a body which destroys all others. He's so powerful. We have seen that. So he's not afraid of anything may happen to him, of giving pain to others. He doesn't feel pain himself. So it's possible that he doesn't understand that he's causing so much pain to others. He doesn't care for that. Of course, we know it's not like that. It's very important that we have in mind Krishna is suffering as the gopis are suffering here. It's not that he's just forgetting about them and enjoying. We try to make that clear in the very beginning of our series, and we will try to continue doing so. But in the ecstasy of her love and separation, with all these ecstatic mad talks, Sri Radha will express in these terms. So then Sri Radha implies, so he has this attitude, and then you, bumblebee, you met this rascal, according to Sri Jiva. Sri Radha refers to Krishna as the rascal, who has a similar nature to you. And you studied Shastra from him. You became schooled by him in the art of how not to give proper respect to to respectful people. Like implying he's doing that with us, and you are now trying to represent him. So that's a type of insult, similarly. And sometimes it is even seen that the student will have greater knowledge than the master. So maybe you are also getting that degree. So PhD for you, Bumblebee, in this type of exploitation. Congratulations for you. So this is very astonishing. Sri Radha basically explains. No? Some people give pain to others, but not for their own benefit, like a drunkard, basically. No? And this Krishna, this serpent of time, Sri Radha paraphrases through Jiva. Sri Jiva paraphrases Radha saying this. He wrongly gave up us, who are obedient women, obedient ladies, after letting us enjoy the nectar of his lip only once, which really bewildering, in the same way you leave a flower after enjoying it. The point is, if you give only one drop of something which is extremely sweet, what to speak, the sweetest of all things, you give a drop of that and you never give that anymore, better not to give anything, not even that drop. Of course, there was not only one drop, but Sri Radha's subjective ecstatic experience was such. On the other side, Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad, he mentions in his own commentary, Brihad Vaishnava Toshani, that in this example of the bee and the flowers, the analogy given here, Śrī Radha implies that her love for Krishna is pure, just as the flower is pure, is the flower is not at fault, basically, but the bee is the one who is coming, taking, exploiting, and living. And here we are not promoting victim consciousness for sure. Śrī Radha is never in that situation. So the implication in connection to the previous verse, the first verse is, well, he gave up. He gave us up because he's a cheater. He's cruel. I mean, we are not at fault. We are innocent. So after chastising Krishna in this way, Śrī Radha chastises Bumblebee and Uddhav for that matter, saying, you are like him. He's like this. So she clearly depicts Krishna's nature according to her bhav. And then she extends that idea to Bumblebee and Uddhav by extension. You are like him, representing him. I mean, he gave us up, and you are now imitating him, Bumblebee, giving up the flower. So you have friendship with him. He's fickle in mind. He's not stable. You adopted those same qualities. Birds of the same feather flock together. So this quality of yours of giving up flowers is further confirming your connection with him. But again, he should not be served. You are serving him. He's your master. He should not be served. He has unfickle nature, unsteady friendship. He has not shown any gratitude whatsoever, but all the contrary. And then again comes the example of Sri Lakshmi, the deity, supreme chaste woman in Vedic tradition, the deity for all ladies. And she's serving your lotus feet, Śrī Radha is saying here. It is heard whenever Krishna goes, Śrī Radha is there, as we have studied in the beginning of Gopi Gita. Jayati dikam janmana braja trayata indira sasradatrahi. Krishna is born in Braj, and that sacred blessed land is served by Lakshmi from that moment on. Lakshmi always resides there. We could say Lakshmi is also there in the form of Krishna's Srivatsa, hair, his chest, and so on. So the point is, Radha implies, but why? Why Lakshmi serves the lotus feet of this fickle drunkard? Only Śrī Radha can speak like that. We are taught to glorify Krishna. Śrī Radha is abusing him from tip to toe, but at the same time, that's the topmost form of Harikatha. If you have prem, you can say those things out of bhav. Like my Guru Maharaj sometimes, it's a different example, but it's similar. Prabodhananda Saraswati in his Chaitanya Charitamrita will abuse the demigods and will criticize from tip to toe any other insight that is different from the gift given by Mahaprabhu. And he will even say, who cares for whatever any of the Das avatars did? Who cares for Varaha? Who cares for Matsya? Mahaprabhu came. He gave what he gave. But again, all the things are saying out of bhav, out of ecstatic attachment, subjective experience. So if you don't have that bhav, you cannot do copy-paste. You will engage in aparad in that case. So we should know how to properly behave. We should engage in anusar, not anukar, following the footsteps, not imitating. So this Lakshmi is serving the feet of this fickle drunkard. And very steadily she's serving. He's so unsteady and she's serving so steadily. So she's massaging his feet, all the services performed by Lakshmi, typically. And what's the reason for this? Śrī Radha says here, her heart has been captured, bewildered by the deceptive words of this Uttama Shloka. Words like Naparayam Nirabhadya Sanjujam Sasadu Krityam Vibhudayu Sapivajam Avajandurjarageha Shrinkham Sambrishchatat Bhapratyatu Sadhana. Krishna is pressing to the gopis, I cannot repay back your love for me. Your love is its own reward. Even in a lifetime of Brahma, I can do that. But I will try somehow or other. You have given. And again, we know he was sincere there. Krishna was totally transparent. But Śrī Radha in this moment of man will take these words and will just criticize Krishna. So Śrī Radha will imply the fact that Lakshmi believed all these words indicates Lakshmi's foolishness and Krishna's cleverness. He's quite a crafty guy. But Lakshmi was too naive. So she believed those things. So Radha is implying with all this, therefore our anger at these cheaters totally justified. So again, she's criticizing Krishna, she's criticizing Lakshmi, she's the Adi Lakshmi, the ultimate Lakshmi, so she has full right to do so. Sridhar Swami says something similar. She rather wonders through him how amazing, why this Padma, this goddess of fortune, serving the lotus feet of him who is so foolish. And Sri Radha says again, yeah, Lakshmi's mind and heart chitta has been taken away by the false chatter of Uttama Shloka. Again, so many people glorifying Krishna. Sri Radha is hearing all this glorification, but the gopis, Sri Radha will say, but we, however, are not undiscriminating like Lakshmi. We are engaging in discrimination, and we know he's a cheater, so we won't believe all this false, his jalpa, this false chatter about him. So again, if we hear all the things from the proper perspective, this should nourish our bhajan. That's the whole idea of this series. Please have that in mind. So now let's turn. Till now, I mostly shared the words of Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Sridhar Swami. We have not touched yet on Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's famous Sarartha Darshini commentary. So we will try to enter now there. As you know, his style of commenting is with in between dialogues between each verse, and Bumblebee and Sri Radha in this case coming and going with different ideas. So according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad, here the Bumblebee seemed to say to her, remember that Sri Radha was criticizing the bumblebee's whiskers, you have pollen, you have, kumkum, and the bumblebee will say to Radha, no, this yellow color is my natural color as a bee. It's not the kumkum from Krishna's connection with other ladies in Mathura. So, I mean, there's no offense from my part, there's no offense from the part of my master. He's only absorbed in you, he only thinks of you, and that's a fact, and that's real. The bumblebee in that case is saying the truth. He does not see any other lady, even while dreaming, as we know, while being in Mathuram, Dwarka, Krishna dreams only about Vrindavan, which again, it's totally true ultimately. So why are you becoming so angry? So to this, Radha is replying this verse according to Vishwanath. After making us drink the nectar of his lips just once, he has given up. And that's his offense. Vishwanath invokes this interesting word, which is offense. So in other words, Sri Radha is calling Krishna an aparadi, which is the most unbecoming thing, the last thing you will like to be considered as. Oh, he's an aparadi. That's the main thing that we are trying to avoid in our bhakti project, aparad. So only the gopis, especially Sri Radha, can call Krishna an aparadi. And there are many leelas in Shastra where this happened the other day. We were sharing one. Let me share some brief words about that. Different leela than this one, but similar instance with Krishna is considered an offender. So once it is said that Krishna is really desperate to find Sri Radha, to meet with her, but the Sakis will tell him, you cannot see Radha today because of, as we will see, aparad. Krishna is sitting in the kunja, and he's eagerly waiting for her, Śrīmatī, to arrive. So when she appears, Sri Radha arrives, actually she wants to witness and test Krishna's love for her, not because she doesn't trust in his love, but she wants only to see that flourishing, blossoming, increase, overflowing. So she goes to a nearby arbor and hides herself there and sends some of her Sakis, Manjari friends to the kunj where Krishna is waiting desperately and more desperately for her. So seeing the Sakis, Krishna will inquire from them eagerly, like, where is my Priyaji? Where is my beloved dearmost? So the Sakis will say, oh Sham Sundar. Today, unfortunately, Sri Radha's superiors have forbidden her to come, to leave the house with some whatever excuse. Of course, she never tells the actual truth of why she's leaving, but she found no good excuse to leave. She has some household duties to perform, so she was not able to come. And of course, Shyam Sundar will say, but I am smelling her bodily fragrance everywhere. So she must be here. Tell me the truth. Do not lie to me. She must be hiding in some nearby kunja just to make fun of me. And he's right. But the Sakis will continue churning the rasa, again, churning Shyam Sundar's heart, saying, no. The fragrance we are hearing is because our clothes are carrying our Swami needs fragrance. And we also use her prasadic clothes, the remnants that she used. So that's why you are always smelling this fragrance. We are always close to her. We use her prasadic clothes. So we are telling you the truth. Today she was not really able to come. So Krishna hears these words and becomes upset and further intensified in longing. So we'll ask, so tell me, how can I meet her? I mean, she's not here. Okay. So what can I do to meet her? I really need to meet her. Again, we are worshiping a needy God, a vulnerable God who has needs out of love, out of prayer, not out of existential void. So there's so much need for services, we see. So the Sakis will instruct Krishna. Okay, just stay here for some time and try to chant the Radhanam, the name of Sri Radha in your mala. Try to perform some japa, some smaran, or her holy name, and she will surely show up. She will be attracted by your chanting. What we are advised to do in our own sadhana. So Shyam Sundar starts to lovingly chant Radha's holy name in a sweet, soft voice, but after some time, he doesn't have the darshan of his Istadev. That's the whole meaning of chanting Sri Nam. From Nam will come Rupa, the form will manifest. That's what Krishna wants. This doesn't happening. So he will ask the gopis, I've chanted for so long now, but your friend is not showing up. So Sakis will reply, well, I mean, you are only chanting, but along with chanting, you should do some hearing. So again, all this is instructing for us as sadhakas. Not only chant Sri Nam, but hear Harikatha. Chanting is, okay, Krishna says Harikatha is more representative of Sri Radha. So both Shravan, Kirtan, Harikatha should be combined together. So now you should listen. We will speak about to you the glories of Sri Radha, and we will chant the holy name of Radha. And you will listen now. Now you engage in Shravan. So in this way, the Sakis behave jokingly and stirring the heart of Krishna more and more. So they start to chant Sri Radha Nam, and Krishna becomes more and more absorbed in that. And Krishna will say, okay, so I have listened, properly absorbed in the Shravan of Sri Radha Nam, but still she has not shown up. So one Saki increasing the joke, and the Rasa will say, we see there's place for Hasya Rasa and Madhurya Rasa as well. To say, I think you are committing offenses. I think Samaparad must be there, because again, that's what we are told. Whenever you are chanting, if there's no spurti, no darshan, no sweetness, aparad is on the way. So it's similarly here, the Sakis will say to Krishna, I think you are committing offenses to the chanting of Sri Radha's holy name. That's why you are not getting any result. Maybe you have gone to Chandravali's Kunja today. And that's it. The conception of aparad in the Lila is not that, I don't know, to blaspheme the Vedas, to consider the demigods. In that case, aparad for Krishna is, have you gone to Chandravali? That's your aparad. So, of course, Sri Radha was sitting aside looking all this thing and laughing, seeing how Krishna was reacting to her. And the Sakis will tell Krishna, okay, now clap your hands and try to chant the whole name of Radha loudly. You committed some offenses in your japa, so the aparad in japa will be overridden by sankirtan, by intense loud chanting. So we will get rid of your offenses, and holy name of Sri Radha will be pleased with you. She will appear. So Krishna, in great loving ecstasy, he joins the Sakis, and all of them engage in ecstatic Radha Nam Sankirtan. So seeing that ecstasy, it is said that Sri Radha can no longer stay away hiding. So she becomes drawn into this scene, and she enters the Kunj and blesses Krishna with her darshan. Krishna falling at her feet, to say that his peacock feather crown rolling on the feet of Sri Radha, and Radha's crying of love for Krishna. And well, of course, the meeting of the divine couple takes place there. So this is one of these many examples, again, where the gopis and especially Radha also can call Krishna aparadi, but in the context, again, of rasa. And again, one of the reasons we continue with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purport of Sri Radha gives us, he made us drink the nectar of his lips, only one, and then he has given us up. So that's his aparad, that's his offense. He gave us a taste, he immediately left us. So you should consider Bumblebee. He really wanted to give us happiness, because if he wanted really to make us happy, he will have given us that nectar repeatedly. And of course he did. But again, this is rather subjective, ecstatic experience now in separation. Remember, this is love in separation. So all the emotions take a particular shape, a particular focus, and a particular intensity. And then comes a very interesting point that Vishwanath makes here. He says, the nectar of his lips is called Adar Amrita. So Amrita means nectar because of sweetness, but Amrita also means non-death. Mrityu means death. So Amrita means immortality. So Adar Amrita means the nectar of his lips is not only sweet, but bestows immortality. So because his lips are nectar, are Amrita, in spite of our suffering, we are not dying because we have entered in touch with those lips which give immortality. So it seems we became immortal, but we are suffering. We would like to die, but we cannot. And even in a deeper sense of chastisement, according to Vishwanath, Sri Radha will imply. And why this did happen? Because Krishna considered, if all these gopis die out of torment and separation of me, then who will be left that I can torture? It's because of this, Sri Radha implies through Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that he has made us drink the nectar of his lips, bestowing immortality, so that this not happen. We remain alive, and he can continue torturing someone for eternity. So again, it seems that Sri Radha is depicting Krishna as the worst possible, most cruel personality that you could ever meet. But again, at the same time, she's totally obsessed with him, in love with him. So you can imagine how speechless Uddhav is at this point. And this is just beginning. So the bumblebee, according to Vishwanath, will reply to Radha saying, again, if he's such a guy, how you chase a woman so virtuous become so desirous of him? Because, I mean, for all that you are saying, what are you doing even speaking about him? So Radha will reply in this verse when she speaks how that mohinim, that nectar of his lips is totally bewildering. The contact with that sweetness has destroyed our intelligence. Of course, it means, we could say from our perspective, that help us transcend even manas and buddhi and all these worldly calculating functions, and it's throwing us into a pool of divine emotions. But in the particular context here, Sri Radha was saying, well, but by tasting that nectar, all our hopes in this life, next life, all have been destroyed. As chaste ladies, we lose our chastity here. Next birth won't be auspicious because we have been adharmic. All this they say in the context of the Lila. Krishna generally is not considering the famous saying that says, you should not cut down with your own hand even a poisonous tree that you have planted and raised yourself. Like implying, even if we are poisonous, we have become unchaste or something, he has cut us, uprooted us in a very cruel way. So what he likes, what he dislikes, difficult to understand, Radha implies here. And the word Mohinim, which means bewildering, Vishwanath connects that with Vishnu's lady avatar, Mohini Murti. So just as Vishnu as Mohini Murti made the devatas drink the nectar, the amrit, in the churning of the ocean, Krishna has made us drink the nectar of his lips once, yet he abandoned us. As someone like you, Bumblebee, abandons a malati or a jasmine flower. And then the bee will reply to that according to Vishwanath. But when he of course, some of these points we have already made them before through other Purvacharyas, but it's important to return over and over again to these ideas to have a clear picture of them. So the bumblebee will say, okay, Krishna abandoned you, but are you at fault or is he at fault? Why you say that he's at fault? So rather she's saying, yes, he's at fault. He gave us up. I mean, like the bee, again, the analogy gives up the jasmine. We are famous in Braj as Sumana, as we mentioned, Sumanasa, like good, intelligent, clear ladies, pure, chaste woman. So we are like the jasmine also. Sumanasa means flower, and sometimes it's applied to the jasmine flower. So the jasmine we are similar to the jasmine in fragrance, Sri Radha implies, in softness, in purity, in in attractiveness. All these qualities have been inherited by us gopis. And sumanas means we have good minds. Sumana, splendid minds. And on the other side, analyze the qualities of your master. He's famous at being fickle, like the bee, only interested in his own pleasure, and so on. So in the same way, the bee attracted after giving many jasmine flowers, sometimes, and that now comes an interesting point. She says, like the bee, sometimes he gets interested into a jasmine flower, but after drinking nectar there, he becomes attached to some inferior flowers. So why should not become angry at Krishna, just as we will with the bee, like implying why the bee is getting attached to an inferior taste, implying Krishna gave us up and he become attached to inferior flowers, to the mature ladies, which cannot provide the pleasure he receives in Braj. So actually we are angry with that. We are desperate because we cannot provide Krishna the pleasure we know he needs. We know how needy Krishna is, and we do not have the opportunity to offer ourselves in service to him. He's such a needy person, and we are here to provide our life from tip to toe for satisfying him. And he has chosen to go to some inferior flowers, ladies, that won't satisfy him fully. So we know that, and that's why we are desperate. So from that side, Sri Radha is making this parallel with the bumblebee and the jasmine. So according to Vishwanath, the bee will argue again, say, well, we know from Shastra Krishna cannot be at fault. He's such a great personality. Gargacharya, when in the name given ceremony, he knows all Shastra. He said Krishna is equal to Narayan. So how can you even suggest that he's at fault? What to speak that he's a drunkard and a liar and a cheater? So Radha, according to Srila Chakravarti Pal, will reply to the bumblebee, and again to Uddhav, who still was not able to open his mouth in front of the deity, Sri Radha, the deity of love personified. So Radha say, yeah, Gargacharya say he's Narayan, let him be Narayan. Like, this is the standard of Brajavasis. Yeah, we heard so many times Indra, Brahma, Gargacharya, he's God, he's Narayan. They can say whatever they like. We know him. We have pratyaksha, direct experience. We know how needy he is, how much he lies, he steals, he's full of desires. He's not God. That's Siddhanta in Braj. Traya Chopanishabdischa Sankhya Yogascha Satpata Upagiya Manamahatmya Harim Samanya Tatmajam. The Parivat Sutra of Kṛṣṇa-lila, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. The whole Shastra, Vedas, Upanishad consider Krishna the supreme absolute. Yashoda considers him my son. That's the Siddhanta of Braj. I don't care for what Shastra say. He's my son, and I know he's on my lap. I have direct experience of that. So pratyaksha above all other evidence. Remember, Nanda Maharaj said that to Uddhav when he tried to pacify him. You have so much affection for God as a son. And Nanda say, my son, God? You are crazy. I thought you were Shastrabid. You were intelligent, but you are speaking nonsense. He steals, he lies. I know how needy he is. He cannot be God. So here Radha was saying, okay, yeah, let him be Narayan, but how can that cover up what we see in real life? That's the point, such as the way he cheats others and so on. We have full experience of that. And she speaks with insight, if you will. And Lakshmi serving him, yes, we mentioned, because her mind is attracted to the glorification given to Uttama Shloka. He hears so much praise from here and there by his own men, by people like you, Bumblebee. And Lakshmi is quite naive, quite like simple-minded. But we, gopis, have been endowed by the creation with skill, intelligence, shyness, and beauty. So how can we be like her? So now again, Sri Radha is comparing herself to Lakshmi and putting herself on top of that, saying, okay, Lakshmi may have heard about Krishna, but she has not studied his character as we did. So she just have a superficial idea of who Krishna is, and that's why she keeps serving him. We have observed in detail, we have full experience. So some ideas in connection to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's conversation between Sri Radha and the bumblebee. So now let's turn, before closing our presentation, to the type of Chitra Jalpa that is included in this particular verse, by analyzing the different sections of the verse and which emotion is present there. So when Radha says in this verse, by making us drink the nectar of his lips, we lose our intelligence. They're rather showing Krishna's deceptive nature. He cheated us by doing that. When she says he instantly gives them up, like the bumblebee gives the flowers, that indicates Krishna's mercilessness. So these are all these qualities that will have to do with the particular jalpa here, Chitra jalpa. Then he says, like you, the V, when Sri Radha is speaking to the bumble, like you, the V, Krishna is indicating Krishna's fickleness. By revealing Lakshmi as simple, all this is said by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Radha is indicating her own cleverness. Lakshmi is naive, we are intelligent. So all these words properly combined, as you can see, are indicating Krishna's ungrateful nature. Again, ungrateful nature in the context of Lila and Radha's man. And Krishna's lack of love for them, which again, in the context of the Lila, Krishna cannot but love them. That's what, if you take off the love that Krishna has for the gopis, you have no longer Krishna, basically. So that love corresponds with his own identity. But Sri Radha will imply with all these names, Uttama Shloka that some people give him, or Dinabandhu, friend of the afflicted, all of these names are wrong. Do not really correspond with him. If Lakshmi becomes our student, we can teach her, actually, how Krishna is actually not Dinabandhu. He's not the friend of the afflicted. He's very cruel. So only Radha can say this, as I mentioned, in relation to whom Lakshmi is about a partial expansion. So which type of Chitra Jalpa is this? All these words in this verse are indicated, as I mentioned, Krishna's, in the context of Radha's divine madness, Krishna's ungrateful nature and lack of love for them. So this refers to a type of Chitra Jalpa called Parijalpa, not Prajalpa. Prajalpa was the previous one. This is Parijalpa. So which are the symptoms of Parijalpa, as Rupa Goswami mentions them, and we have already mentioned in the context of this verse. He says that when a person reveals indirectly their own cleverness, Sri Radha did that by saying Lakshmi is naive, while enumerating another's faults, in this case Krishna's, and which faults are enumerated in Parijalpa: mercilessness, duplicity, and fickleness, ungratefulness, and other qualities in that line. This is called Parijalpa. So we have seen here how all these particular components are there present in this verse to be considered one of these 10 types of mad talks or Chitra Jalpa. So Sri Radha keeps speaking Chitra Jalpa, and Uddhav cannot say but a word here. He doesn't know what to do, what to say. At the same time, he's aware this is not an ordinary situation. There is full prem here, I can feel it, but how it plays itself out, that's totally bewildering to me. So I understand if you may be yourself speechless and bewildered. Uddhav himself did. So yeah, this is a topic that is above our heads. But as we were mentioning last class, even if you have a theoretical understanding of this, a theoretical proper notion of prem, come or last, will run from your heart immediately. So how powerful is prem? Even if you understand it theoretically, you are free from selfish desire. And of course, main reason why we are organizing all this series of lectures revolving around this highest prem is because of that. As sadhakas, we need to be properly acquainted with this world of emotions and appreciate that reality. That's sadhana. We could say that sadhana, one way of defining sadhana is theoretical appreciation of bhava and prem. We are not there yet, but we can instruct ourselves in order to appreciate that goal, long-term, middle-term goal to attain in the form of bhava and prem. So sadhana bhakti means that stage where I educate myself and I learn to appreciate in theory. I learn the theory and to appreciate the theory that is underlying the reality of bhava and prem. And that will take us in that direction eventually in the level of insight. And as we know, the entrance to the world of bhava, to the world of prem, is through the gate of separation. Through separation in our particular stage, and we are in separation somehow or other. So that's very befitting. That will come eventually the union. So these sections all the songs of the gopis in the Bhagavatam, Bhramara-gita, Jugal-gita, Viraha-gita, Gopi-gita, Venu-gita, Pranaya-gita, all of them depict some type of separation. So they are more important even for us sadhakas than those narratives that depict, for example, the Antya-lila, which mostly describe the union, the daily union in the Nitya-lila, Radha and Krishna and the Brajavasis. Of course, they are important and beautiful, but in these other sections of the Bhagavatam, Vipralamba, separation, is mentioned there. By showing, again, the example of the Ragatmikas, the ones who do not only have love for Krishna, but are made of love of Krishna. This Ragatmika can be termed as radical enrapturement, if you want. Radical is a very interesting word, because the word radical, the very root of the word radical, the Latin root is radix. So radix means from the root. So radical means something that is there from the very root. So the word raga, when you say ragatmika, and we translate as radical enrapturement, we will say, and raga, as you know, is derived from the Sanskrit ranj, which means to be colored, to delight in, to exalt. So the ragatmikas, those who are made of rag, are colored, if you will, in prem, from the very root of their being, from tip to toe, every pore of their being, Sri Radha and so on. So this coloring is not brought about through any dyeing procedure, some color, external imposing of some color there, but they themselves eternally are such color, such coloring, such raga, in their very atmaka, in the very essence of their being. So that's why their prem is depicted as ragatmika. Their prem is of the essence of this raga, of this radical enrapturement. So sometimes an example is given, and with this, let me some few words. Excuse me if I extend some extra minutes today. But also in Ayurveda, there's this interesting process called bhavana. For those who know Ayurveda, you may know what I'm speaking about. Bhavana will refer to like saturation with liquids. So use this to purify and augment the potency of a particular drug, an herb. And so, for example, you take the powder of a particular whatever, the amalaki fruit, let's say. So you take the dry powder of that, and that powder of that fruit is soaked in the juice of that same plant. So you take dry powder of amalaki juice and soak that in the amalaki fruit, dry powder, soak that in amalaki juice. So that's called swabhavana, which means self-saturation. You immerse the product in the same product in the form of juice. And when you repeat that many times, that's called bahusvabhavana, which means abundant self-saturation. So you can imagine the power of that particular herb at that moment. It's called bhavita. That drug is called bhavita at that point, which means saturated. So why I'm saying all this, you can imagine, speaking on Ragatmika Bhakti, the gopis, Sri Radha herself, their bare being is constituted of the very essence of Ladini Shakti, which essence is Bhava, and Sri Radha is Mahabhav Swarupini. So they are eternally undergoing such divine saturation, bhavana, soaking themselves by full perpetual immersion in Krishna Prem. Anadi Siddha Samskars, in the words of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So the gopis and the gopas, the Nitya Siddhas, what to speak of Radha herself, they are of such nature. So that's why it is that Krishna, who is known on many circles as Aptakam, he whose desires are completely satisfied, or Atmaram, he who delights in his own self. That's why even on he's such, he desires to enjoy with the gopis, with such saturated prem-like beings. This is clearly shown, put in context from the very first verse of the Rasa-lila, which is the main section of the Bhagavatam, depicting Krishna's love for the gopis. The very first verse, Bhagavana Piratri. It says, Bhagavan, even though he's Bhagavan, he's Atmaram, Aptakam, Api, even it means, even he is satisfied, self-satisfied, he desired to enjoy with the gopis. So that's the idea. Krishna is Bhagavan, supremely independent, blissful, fulfilled, but he's fully needy in connection to the love of the Braja Prem. So his godhood, as we expressed the other day in the Gadadhar Pandit's Avirbhav Harikatha, his own godhood, Bhagavatva, is overridden, if you will, is transgressed, if you will, is transcended, is upgraded, overcome by the gopis' love. Sanatana Goswami mentioned that idea in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The ultimate limit and perfection of godhood is when the Supreme submits to his devotees to such a degree that it contradicts his own qualities as God, self-satisfaction, and all these qualities. He becomes totally needy, but submitting himself to Prem, Bhakti-ananda, Swarup Shakti-ananda. There is no fault, it's an ornament, it's a charming addition in the context of Bhakti Rasa. And again, separation has a very crucial role in this regard. Separation increases their relationship. And separation, how to say, it's real suffering. The problem with suffering for us conditioned souls is that we are experiencing unreal suffering, illusory suffering, suffering in the context of illusion, Maya Shakti. We don't know how to suffer. That's basically the idea. The solution to suffering is not stop suffering, but learn suffering. Learn to suffer, not stop suffering. That's an important, interesting point. That's why sometimes they say the goal of life is to find purpose and not to just be happy. You can be suffering from the proper cause and you are expanding your heart. Compassion is a type of suffering which expands your heart. But to speak of this type of suffering, so much expanding. So, on purpose is the goal of life, and prem prayojan, paramartha, artha means purpose, prayojan means purpose. So when you reach that, everything has purpose because Krishna is in the center. So we are not here so much stop suffering, but learn to suffer. Then you will stop suffering in the unbecoming way that suffering comes to our life. So we are here to learn, to suffer for love. If love is there, everything becomes desirable. Suffering, union, separation. With Krishna in the center, everything finds its proper place. So all these Gitas are so important, the gopis, because all deal with some type of suffering, but they are teaching us, the gopis are instructing us, this is how you should suffer. Now you are suffering because you are not suffering for Krishna, really. Now you are crying false tears because you have not learned to express real tears in divine love. So this is the way for us. And we as Gaudiya, as Bada Jivas, Gaudiyas but Bada Jivas, generally we see happiness and suffering as opposites. That's an interesting polarity we perceive as Bada Jivas. One is like killing the other. But in Gaudiya Vedanta, we will say, no, one is invoking the other. One is nourishing the other. Happiness and distress, union and separation. The union will create separation. Separation will invoke union. So while we ourselves not fully resolving this, we are actually indulging in self-sabotage of our devotional project. So we have to learn how to integrate these polarities into a higher synthesis. This is real transcendence, as we have said many times. Transcendence is not dismissing anything, but integrating everything in the higher synthesis. So the gopis here are teaching one of those very valuable lessons. So sorry for extending myself a little bit today, but I want to share some few thoughts in connection to this second verse of Sri Bhramara Gītā. And of course, if you have any questions you may like to share today, I've now put the option of unmuting yourself for those who are in Zoom, and for those who are following in this faithful streaming, I will check if you want to have written anything, and you can write, of course, if you want in Zoom any questions. So are there any questions? It seems not today. Okay, so it seems we have no questions today. So someone, Kanuram has a question?
Yes, I want to ask you, we're talking about the gopis have this sense of anurag, and I think I'm misunderstanding this point or thinking about it differently, that anurag is like the feeling that they have for Krishna and before they have met, but you're talking about it differently today. Am I thinking about something else?
Now, what you mentioned is purva rag.
Purva rag.
The word rag is there. Everything is about rag. Purva rag is one of the four types of separation. Is the first one, the only one we can go through ourselves as conditioned souls, which means you have never met the object of your love, but you wish to do so, and you start to meet that person, if you will, by hearing about that person, about Harikatha. In our case, I'm speaking in this case, or in the case of the gopis in the Lila, they saw Krishna, they heard about Krishna, but they have not had the chance of officially acknowledging their love for him. So all that is purva rag. So the beginning, the falling in love, if you will, before the official meeting, first meeting. That's one of four types of separation. Purva rag, man, prem chityam pravas. And anurag is one of the seventh developments of prem. Sneha, man, pranay, rag, anurag, bhav, mahabhav. So of course, all of them are included in the gopis and Sri Radha. So they appear at different moments. So anurag means a type of development of prem where you feel that at every single moment the beloved's beauty appears ever new, ever fresh. And that's the experience of Sri Radha in relation to Krishna. Every time Krishna's beauty appears new and fresh, so that kind of upgrades her own disposition of service to that. Her dedication increases because Krishna's beauty increases. And when Sri Radha's dedication increases, Krishna's beauty increases. No, so the two of them, Krishna Das Kaviraj says, enter into a competition and none of them accept defeat. So, and another form of this expression is that, as I mentioned today, they may have met some minutes before, but the nature of Anurag makes, I never met him. No, it's like every time it's like the first time, but every time it's upgraded, like in comparison to the previous time. So it's ever increasing hankering and longing and neediness, but in the context of love. So yeah, that will be a very basic difference between anurag and purvarag. So similar terms, but different realities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, something else? Okay, so it seems the rest speechless as Uddhava is by hearing Bhramara Gītā. So it's okay. It's a good symptom. We need to hear and to ruminate and to do something with this revelation that comes to us by the grace of Srimad Mahaprabhu, Sri Guru, Parampara, the Sadhu. So we are really extremely indebted and blessed. And hopefully we can do something with our lives, trying to reciprocate for such a level of insight. So thank you very much to all of you for your presence. I hope to see you next week with the next verse, and we will finish our session as usual by invoking the pranam mantra that Uddhava offered to Sri Radha and the gopis and all the Brajavasis, but especially in this case to the Braja Gopikas for living Braj, where he says that he inclines his head to their feet perpetually, trying to enter in touch with the dust from her sacred lotus feet, and whose kirtan, the gopis kirtan, has the potential of purifying the three worlds. So we are praying in that spirit, hoping that this session of the Harikatha, in this case representing Radha's kirtan, may get, we may be sprinkled with at least one little drop of that grace and mercy, so we can increase our dedication to such an ideal. Bandinanda Brajastrinam Padarenum Nabhikshna Sajasam Harikatodgitam Punati Bhuvanatri. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srimad Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Bhramara-gita ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Pramanand, Hari Hari Bo. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gauda Gauda Hari Bol.